have some announcements. Next month, Scott Burns will be our speaker on the third Thursday, which is April the 20th at 7 p.m. at the Tualatin Heritage Center. That will be an in-person meeting, and his topic will be recent earthquakes and implications for the Portland area. Also, we would like to ask anyone in the audience with computer technical savvy and for help with Constant Contact, which we use to announce our meetings, and Zoom meeting management. And anyone who's interested in helping and working on that with me or us, our board, would be just go to our website, the Lower Columbia, at iafi.org, which is on our site here. Tonight's presentation will be recorded and will be on the IAFI YouTube channel. So I want to talk a little bit about Bill. He's our speaker tonight, Bill Burgel. 40-year career in the railroad industry, in engineering and operating departments. His work for Union Pacific and other railroads encompassed the first computer. He helped create and develop the first computer-aided dispatching office in the nation. He was chief dispatcher in the Portland office. When that office was moved to Omaha, he went with them in the same job. After retirement in 1989, Bill assisted with the Surface Transportation Board as their rail operational manager for two major mergers, one in Washington, D.C., and the other one in Chicago. He managed many rail studies for both the Oregon and Washington Department of Transportation, TriMet, and others in the Pacific Northwest. His interest in training in geology has led him to resolve landslide issues, rerouting studies for the railroads, implement earthquake warning strategies, and conduct many long railroad tunnel analyses. Bill received his Bachelor's of Science in Engineering from the University of Michigan and his master's degree in Masters of Science in Structural Geology from Idaho State University. Bill's talk tonight is Cascade Subduction Zone and Crustal Pacific Northwest Earthquakes, including earthquake preparedness in the Portland, Vancouver area. Please welcome Bill Burgel, also the newest member of our Lower Columbia chapter board. Bill, take it away.
All right, thank you, Charles. How do you want to handle questions, Charles? Do you want to just shout them out, or do you want to wait till the end there?
Well, why don't we wait till the end?
Okay.
Okay.
Let me grab the screen here.
Now, Lloyd, have we started the recording?
Yeah.
Okay. Recorded by the host. Go ahead. There you go. And go ahead. And do I hit Goddard or do you?
No, I think we're okay, Charles.
Okay. Well,
we're ready to go. You guys hear me okay? Charles?
Yes, Bill, we can hear you.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Here we go. All right, so the question is, well, let's just get right into the program. The first one's just a title. The question is, should we prepare for an earthquake? And Scott Burns and I both were educated, and Lloyd as well, Lloyd Decay. We were taught that there wasn't really much to worry about in terms of earthquakes up here in the Pacific Northwest. And you can see from that upper map that where the yellow, where Oregon is, there isn't much in terms of seismicity. And then the more detailed map just below it, you can see some of the epicenters plotted out here. Certainly down in California, Mendocino area, we just had one the other day, lots of earthquakes, and up here where these triple junctions are, and up where it's all stuck up here in the Seattle area, there's a lot of seismicity going on, but not much in the Oregon area. So we were taught that the area was somewhat aseismic, and some of the thinking was because the Columbia River cut through the big volcanic arc that might have somehow lubricated the surfaces between the subducting plate and the continent with some sort of special fluid. But that didn't make a lot of sense. But nobody could see. They could certainly see the volcanoes, but they didn't see any historical evidence for an earthquake. We went ahead without really worrying about an earthquake. The Washington Public Power Supply folks back in '73 decided to build 5 nuclear plants, and they were moving pretty forward with this idea. They broke ground on the one at Satsupp and the one in Hanford, and it was about that time the insurance companies that were underwriting all these nuclear plants, they said, well, wait a second, we see all these volcanoes. So they hired Thomas Heaton, who ran the geology program at Caltech for many years. So Thomas got up in an airplane and flew around, and he looked and he looked and he looked, and he says, well, it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. I guess maybe this subduction zone, it has all the trappings of being a major structure here in the Pacific Northwest. It's just that we don't have any evidence for the seismicity. And then right about that same time, Mount St. Helens in '80 blew its top, and that really got all the people that were trying to underwrite this WHOOPS program. That really got them worried. It was the taxpayers of Washington that were underwriting it, and they basically had a little rebellion, and they canceled that project, as you know. And if you drive over by Grays Harbor, you can still see the cooling tower for Satsupp, and the only nuclear power plant that's still in operation is the one there at Hanford. They still use that one. So that was basically the end of that in '83. They defaulted on that. It was the biggest default. I think it might still be the biggest default. It's one of the bigger ones. But we still see the sense that there's something happening. I mean, all right, so we dodged the bullet with the nuclear power plants located in a subduction zone, but we do have this idea that something's out there going to happen, and so the state of Oregon is trying to get their arms around it, and they convened something called the Oregon Seismic Safety Policy Group, and I attended a lot of those meetings, and I yet to see a lot happen there. But you'll see that most of a lot of the sketches in this program are taken from that. And one of the impetus for that and the report that got generated in 2013 was the fact that over here on the west side of the Pacific, we had in 2011, we had a major seismic event about over there at Fukushima that basically created a lot of shaking. It destroyed a lot of buildings and created a large 50, a 60, 70 foot high tsunami wall that came in and destroyed a lot of property there. The reason that's relevant is on the mirror image side on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, we have the same thing. This is a little wrong, and the Pacific plate doesn't go both ways like that. It just goes to the west, and over here is the Juan de Fuca plate that's subducting under our coastline here. Simple geometry or basically physics in terms of what goes up and what goes down when two plates collide, but your continental crust is lighter, so it tends to float. The oceanic basalt is created as a little heavier. It's has a lot more magnesium and iron in it, so when they intersect with another continental or another plate, if it's ocean, you never know which one's going to go down and which one's going to go up. But if a continent and an ocean bottom intersect, it's usually it's always the basaltic oceanic bottom that's going to go down into the mantle. And that's kind of what's left. This is one of the smaller plates in the world in terms of size. And this is the spreading center here in the Juan de Fuca plate, and they have these transform faults that offset it here. This is where it goes to land as the San Andreas fault down here by Mendocino. So that's basically the plate, and the subducting of that plate is creating the Cascade Mountain Range north and south here. This is the rough direction of the movement of the plate, and you see the Pacific plate's going at an oblique angle away from it. You get a lot of the earthquakes that you read about and hear about on the news down here by Port Orford, which is down here, just sticks out at the Oregon coast here. But you get a lot of the 2s and 3s and sometimes 4s on this transform fault. So we're constantly getting bombarded for that. And basically what that's saying is a lot of those don't tend to create tsunamis or anything like that, but they are certainly showing that these plates are very, very active out there. Again, here's another review of the plate, and this green area is a foreshadow of what I'm going to talk about next. It's the subduction plate, and this is what they call the Great Plate, or the one plate that is subducting under the Oregon coast. Here's another view of it, and you know, this plate goes down underneath, and it melts down here, and the lighter material comes up and creates this volcanic arc that you're all familiar with. Let's get back into the history of this thing, and I've got this from Chris Goldfinger, who talks a lot about John Adams, who worked for the Canadian Geologic Survey, and in '85 he came up with the idea that you had about 13 evidence of 13 turbidites down along the coast out to sea, and this is this heavy green line is the basically the margin between, this is Oregon and this is the ocean over here, the Pacific Ocean. So all these submarine canyons are located just off the coast. You see the Columbia River here, state of Washington up here. And what John did, he went out there and sampled these different canyons with a core, and he came up with the fact that he at the bottom of his sampling, he plunged these sample tubes down to where he intersected the Mazama ash layer, which was down there quite a few feet, and then he counted the number of interruptions, basically turbidite layers that were on there, and he thought, okay, if I have 13 coming out of this tributary and 13 coming out of here, that might add up to 26. But it turns out all throughout every one of these canyons, even though they have different sources, so each one of these drainages can be earmarked by some of the detritus that's in these canyons. Like, for instance, anything that comes out of the Columbia River is going to have some crystalline material mixed in it. So each one of these drainages were fairly distinct, but each one of them tended to have 13 distinct layers, and he thought that was pretty indicative of the fact that these turbidite layers must have been created by a massive earthquake. So that was his thinking. 2 years later, Brian Atwater, he's basically was born to be in a canoe, and he spent some time canoeing around the Grays Harbor area, and he came across this very famous picture, which shows the basically the smoking gun of one of these subduction events. And basically what happens, you'll have a big earthquake off the shore, and it'll drop this land. This land would have been up in the air, and it drops at about 6 to 8 feet. And the first thing that happens is you get this layer, 4 to 6 inches of tsunami sand that gets launched onto the basically onto the land surface that used to be up in the air. And because it's been depressed by the loss of the compression that was occurring, you basically get a mud layer that gets deposited by the bay or the ocean that's next to shore there, and then basically the compression starts up again, and then this gets elevated up into the atmosphere, and then you get a sand layer that builds up, and then you get the peat layer. You see the peat layer on top. So the whole thing repeats itself time and time again. So then Brian Atwater said, well, okay, what he couldn't decide is if it was 3 distinct events or was it one big event. And that was a fairly important distinction in his mind. And he was able to get radiocarbon dating from an area up by here, by Grace Harbor, then down by Netarts Bay, and then down by Reedsport. So he took all this data and he basically narrowed it down to, we had some big event that happened in about a 15-year period or 25-year period between 1695 and 1720. So he had a person that was a specialist in ring dendrology, and then Dave Yamaguchi, and he went over to Japan to do the research to pin down this date, and they found just a treasure chest of information that pinpointed the historic date, and then Brian back calculated the date to where the actual big event, which was a major plate, which is one plate that slid off at the one time, and that occurred on January 26th, the year 1700 at 9 p.m. at night. And that's what all geologists use. So he calls his book The Orphan Tsunami because they didn't feel an earthquake in Japan. It just showed up one day and wreaked havoc on that particular day in 1700. Another shot of the subducting plate, and this is about where you got to have enough mass of the continent moving west in order to complete or to cause the two plates to kind of catch, and then this bows up in the air and then elevates the coastline. And then once that releases, that whole coastline sinks 6 to 8 feet, and then the whole process starts again. Then Chris Goldfinger got involved in this about, Chris just retired from Oregon State, but he and this Hans Nelson, they got some money from National Science Foundation. They went out on a ship with the idea that they were going to disprove John Adams's ideas. And they did some coring, and almost right away they realized that John Adams finding 13 turbidites in each of these canyons was correct, and then they became strong advocates for what John was trying to say. And he continues to this day to really work on these turbidites and just how they are interpreted down in the bottom of the sea there. And this is basically what happens is you get the sediments coming from the river in Oregon. This is a little backwards in terms of Oregon, or you're looking south, I guess, from the coast. And the sediment sits up on the shelf, and then it's saturated with water, and then it doesn't take much, but an earthquake that's out to sea here or in the general area will cause that whole area to slide down there at a very high speed, and it will basically create a layer down here, down at on the ocean bottom off the shelf there. And you see up in the upper, you get some graded bedding there as well. But you can use those to date, and that's what Chris did. He, if you look at this chart that he put together, there's 13 major events here that basically started back around when Mount Mazama went off back here. So right is here where Mount Mazama erupted, and that sends down a pretty good ash layer down there as a marker bed. And then Chris did all the research and I'm sure you helped him too, Scott, but basically came up with this probability of when Chris divided he saw demarcation at the near about Newport, Oregon. So he divides the plate into two chunks, the northern chunk and the southern chunk, and basically there's a preponderance to have slightly less vigorous earthquakes south of this line because you're getting closer to the end of the plate, and that frequency is every 243 years, whereas north of there it's a little bit more than that. And as you guys all know, from 1700 it's been 323 years since the last quake when it relaxed, and so we're well overdue for the southern part, and we still got a little time to sleep at nights if you live north of Newport. Then, like I say, the state of Oregon got involved with this, is trying to promote being prepared. This piece that came in, written by Catherine Schultz for the New Yorker in 2015, did more to help us geologists get the word out. She basically said that everything west of I-5 was going to be toast. So that's a line that tend to resonate with most folks. If you do get a subduction zone off to sea, it'll be out here in the blue, and then basically by the time it hits shore, it's going to attenuate a little bit. And then when you get over to Portland, it'll be, if it's a 9 out the shore, out to sea there, it'll be an 8 on the coastline, and it'll be 6.5 to 7 here in Portland. If you're living on the coast, you're definitely going to get knocked down if you're walking around, and then you've got 20 minutes to get away from the shore before the tsunami hits. So that's if you're over there when you feel the shaking, you get knocked down first. You probably, because that whole coastline is going to sink about 5 to 8 feet, you're not going to probably be able to drive anywhere. So the idea of driving away because you think you can is probably not going to be a viable option for you. The further you go away from the coast, the damage does attenuate as you move to the east. But you also have this to worry about. You have these crustal quakes that are quite a bit more up in the Seattle area, and that has to do with the crustal rotation I'll talk about in a minute. But you see the alignment down here in Oregon, and the West Hills that elevate all the hills to the west of downtown, and you see a lot of this crustal business going on all around here. Since for the last 150 years, we've only had about 5 class magnitude 5 quakes. You see that really, we talked about the rotation of this. Oregon is kind of sliding slowly in a northwest fashion, and it's going about 1 degree per million years. And this basically, if you look at the alignment of these faults up here in the rotation, you look at the actual fault traces down here in the Portland area, you see it tends to mimic this northwest rotation quite well. Ashley Strike, who was a student at Portland State, just did a research out here at Gales Creek, which is right out just it'd be just west of Cornelius and Forest Grove. But she, along with Ray Wells, who was one of her advisors, did find quite a bit of an offset on one of these faults here. And that's part of this northwest rotation in terms of a kind of a shear fault. The advent of LIDAR, which is basically radar that's able to look through vegetation, you can see, if you look at the old way of looking at things, you'd be really hard pressed to see an extremely well demarcated. This is a Seattle fault that's at the south end of Seattle, over here on Bainbridge Island, and that fault last released about 1,000 years ago, and now that's where all this northwest, if I can go back here, northwest rotation. I'm going the wrong way here. Yeah, so this northwest rotation basically terminates I didn't. If I were to extend this a little north, you'll see that it doesn't go past Seattle. Basically, that all that northwest rotation tends to stop right there in the Seattle area. So I'm pretty worried about the Seattle fault, which is on the south end of Seattle, which is a reverse fault, and it's trying to absorb all that energy. But just to wrap up here in Portland, we've got the 6 earthquakes in the past 150 years that were greater than 5.0, and you know, if you were to get that, you know, we could get something as big as this 6.8 to 7.0 on the Portland Hills Fault. And you're not going to get much warning if that happens. You get a little bit more warning out if it's a subduction zone quake, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But if it's a crustal quake, that could happen anytime. I'll ask Scott about that in a minute. In terms of warning, the USGS, along with a lot of folks, developed this something called Shake Alert, and we put it in service here about 3 years ago or so. First they put it in service down there in LA, and right away the Ridge Crest earthquake out in the Mojave by Death Valley triggered that, and they found they had used some wrong logic, and so nobody in LA got warned. Not that they were in any harm, but they didn't know about it. So it was kind of a good test, because the particular earthquake, which is a 7.0 out by Death Valley, didn't really hurt anybody. But now they've since worked out those bugs, so to speak, and then it's now online here in Oregon, Washington, and all of California. And basically, this idea is that you have an earthquake out here to sea or wherever, and then wherever you can locate the sensors. In the case of Oregon, we have them along the coast here, and what it's doing, what these sensors are doing, is picking up these P waves, which are the first waves that are generated by the actual breakage of the Earth. And so when these P waves come along, they're pressure waves or primary waves. They tip off this sensor, and the sensor will talk to other nearby sensors, and they'll figure out that you've got a big earthquake coming. And what it'll do then is it'll send that data to the city in this case. So let's assume this is Portland, and basically you'll get some warning if this is out to sea, you know, 80, 90 miles. You'll get a warning in a few seconds by these P waves, and they run in advance of the S waves, or the shear waves, and those are the ones that do the damage. And so you got a few minutes warning. By the time this all occurs here in the Portland area, you're going to get about 50 seconds of warning if the actual breakage is off the coast of Cannon Beach or Seaside, that general area. And if it's more than 50 seconds, then it's going to be up and down the coast, away from Portland a little bit, and we'll get a little longer warning. But that 50 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot in terms of if you're running trains down the tracks at 70 miles an hour, full hazardous. It's good to get a warning for that. And then the electrical folks, that they can trip their circuit breakers, you know, if they get 50 seconds of warning. And the thing that really affects the general public is the fact if you're in a building that's been designated as an unreinforced masonry building, you want to probably not be standing in the doorway of that building when you get the warning. This warning will show up on your phone like an Amber Alert. It'll just show up. I don't think you have to do anything. And this idea of getting a warning is not a new one. This has been around since 1868 is when this Dr. Cooper, they were putting a railroad in California there, and he realized the electrons flowing through the telegraph lines moved a hell of a lot faster, you know, on a P wave versus an S wave. And he basically came up with the idea that you could send an alarm that you're going to get an earthquake in a few seconds. So he came up with this idea quite a long time ago, and we finally got around to implementing it. Again, this is what the P waves look like. You get a compression set up by it's like ringing a bell, so to speak, and then the S waves come. They're a couple hundred miles slower than that. And again, this is what the S waves and the P waves. The red line's the P waves, and the S waves are over here. And basically, they when they hit you, then they actually do make the ground go up and down, and buildings go from side to side. And then just this is my little sketch on, basically if you have an earthquake out here by the edge of the continent here, basically you're going to get, just doing the math, you're going to get notified right here in Portland about, you get somewhere between 40 and 60 seconds of warning, just on simple math here. Things in terms of the intensity of the quake, where you actually live is going to vary quite a bit. You've got the subsurfaces pretty much looks like this over here on the left, and they found that out in the Loma Prieta quake that based on the shape of the subsurface, the way the seismic waves kind of hit basically the bottom of the subsurface, they refract back up and will damage certain places in the substrate in a different manner. So that's kind of why the Cypress Freeway came down, and the Marina District in San Francisco got affected because they basically just the shape of the sub basin there. The other thing that Dr. John Adams up in Canada says, and this is most geologists know that the larger the area you're going to get, the larger the magnitude. So if you get a big earthquake and it's going to rip it, it moves at I think it's about 200 miles an hour is the zipping of the undoing of the earthquake along its trace. And so when you get a long period of, if your shaking goes on for 3 to 4 minutes, then you've got a subduction zone quake. And so I've kind of summarized these two types of quakes that if we are suddenly hit by one here, if you have the presence of mind to look at your watch when the shaking starts, if you time the shaking to be 3 to 5 minutes long, and that's also the longevity of the shaking, makes it stresses the metal in a lot of the buildings in the reinforced concrete, that sort of thing. So you're going to end up with a lot more damage the more long lasting the shaking occurs. And if it stops fairly quick, 10 seconds to 40 seconds, then it's likely to be a crustal quake. It's going to be a lot more immediate. The trick here is you're with a subduction zone quake, you're going to probably get some warning, but if you suddenly feel some pretty major waves here, again, the magnitude is likely to be the same of both quakes here in the Portland area. But if you don't get any warning, it's more likely it's going to be a crustal quake, and the epicenter is going to be fairly close by. Again, because it's a crustal quake, you're a ways from the ocean, you're not going to risk having a tsunami so much. But if you're over on the coast and you feel the shaking, I mean, you got about 20 minutes before that tsunami comes back. And based on the Fukushima thing, they've revised their estimate of how high that tsunami wall is going to be. I'm going to switch now to preparation. And, Lucy Jones was up here a few years ago, and she talked about this, basically this idea of if you absolutely have to spend the money now to get prepared. I mean, and that's incumbent upon everybody that's on this Zoom call right now, is to make sure your legislatures are clued in to the fact that they are really going to have to pay for this, even though it's something that's happening in the future. And that's a really hard thing to do. If you're a legislature, you're only in office for a couple of years, and then you gotta put a down payment down on a system that's basically may not be needed until 50 years after you've gone, but you got to make those decisions now. And the idea is, if you're not ready and you have some sort of major disturbance here, if you're not ready, that you're going to end up on this blue line down at the bottom in terms of the future. And Japan had this Fukushima earthquake, and they were definitely ready, and they basically came out ahead on that one. They're still struggling with the nuclear power plant because they hired the wrong geologist, Scott. That's about the best thing I can say. But their geologist said that subduction zone quakes were a thing of the past, and so you didn't have to worry about them anymore, which wasn't the smartest thing they ever paid for. But here's another way of looking at that. When you get the disaster, if you're resilient and are built up, your recovery is so much quicker than it might otherwise. And basically, San Francisco wasn't prepared for their 1906, and New Orleans certainly wasn't prepared for Katrina. And the problem is, I was going to put dollar signs either side of this disaster hits line. In the case of New Orleans, they basically, the Corps had come to the city in 2002 and said they needed to rebuild all the levees and all the water restraints that they need to survive as a city, and they basically told everybody it was going to be $14 billion to do it. The legislature, sat on it. They said, "Nah, that's something we don't want to worry about. It's too much money, that sort of thing." And as you know, Katrina hit in 2005. So, all right. So once the town's in ruin and the Ninth Ward is under, 15 feet of water, I mean, the Corps goes back and says, "Hey, that idea that we needed that money to rebuild the levees, and so here comes the money, right?" So the money that they gave them was, guess what? It turned out to be the same, 14 billion. So the reason I bring that up is, it's important to basically spend that money. You're going to spend it either side of this line in terms of preparation, but it's absolutely incumbent that you do it before the disaster hits. We've got an issue in terms of all these red dots are homes in the Portland area that basically, really, they had a building code in 74, but we didn't get around to adjusting it based on Brian Atwater's work with the subduction zone until 93. So anything built after 93, 94 is probably, from a seismic point of view, is going to be a lot more resilient than before 93. This is just a shot of your liquefiable areas. Again, if you know the Missoula floods, you can tell where that red tracing is. That's mostly sand, and that's going to be, or loess, and it's going to be very liquefiable in terms of resilience in terms of an earthquake. We do have a problem with these unreinforced masonry buildings around. I mean, why we haven't had the political will to do something about it, it's just, to me, it's just amazing. And, we had a commissioner recently just say, well, it's discriminatory, that sort of thing. And, I don't understand that logic. This little case in point down here, Napa, California, I've talked to them several times over the years. They were basically mandated in 2006. Basically the state of California, following the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989, they said every community had to upgrade their unreinforced masonry building. And in the case of Napa, California, they didn't do anything until 2006. I don't know what prompted them to do that. I think it took a while to get the state programs running. And this was basically a loan and, state funds that were going to help you pay retrofit your building All right, so they 2006 to 2014, they basically retrofitted 160 of the 180 masonry buildings in Napa, California. And then they had right under the city center, they had a magnitude 6. Not major, but the ones that there was 20 buildings that weren't retrofitted, and those all came down. And some of them affected or damaged the ones that had been retrofitted. It turns out there was an attorney in town that he was basically against any of this retrofitting business, and his building, which was a major building in downtown Napa, that all came down. So he lost everything in terms of he was fighting this, and for no real good reason. But you know, we as a to me, it's a travesty that we haven't come up with a program to pay for retrofitting these buildings. This is a chart of recovery time that Oregon Resilience Plan put together in 2013. You know, these are, you know, you can look at these numbers, and you know, basically you see here in the valley, you say a year, we're in the valley here, and a year for drinking water and sewer. You know, that wasn't quite what happened in Christchurch, New Zealand. They basically had 2 fairly minor earthquakes about 5 months apart, 6 months apart, and they were on slightly different fault systems. But you know, the 7.1, a lot of the buildings withstood the initial quake, and they you know, basically they felt like they had dodged a bullet with this first earthquake. But then you know, 5 months later they had a 6.3, and that's the one that did all the damage, even though it sounds like, you know, it was a lot less magnitude. But it because a lot of their land was liquefiable, they had a heck of a time with their sewer system, and it took the whole downtown. They lost in their downtown center, they lost 1,200 buildings, and in the total area they lost about 10,000. And most of these were these unreinforced buildings. And this is 7 years after the earthquake when this photo was taken in down Christchurch. And the folks at the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management, they have used Christchurch as an example to try to model their reactions to an earthquake. So that's pretty important. That basically it took 4 to 5 years to get the sewer built back up. When the earthquake hit, the whole landmass subsided about 1 meter, which is 3 feet. And basically, because the land was liquefiable, and because the sewer lines were made of this basically cast concrete with bell ends, so to speak, and they just sit snugly together. When the earthquake hit, the bell ends of these sewer pipes opened and closed repeatedly during the shaking, and with the force of all the liquefiable sand, it basically injected the sewer pipe completely full of all the liquefiable sand material in there, and consequently it rendered their entire sewer system, you know, basically that plus the change in elevation, basically they had to start all over in terms of sewerage. They were able to get the potable water to the folks, and then the only thing that saved them was, I think, 15,000 portable toilets for the last few years. But you know, I'd like to, of all these things that are listed by the state resiliency plan, you know, I think you're talking 4 to 6 years of recovery just for the sewer system, because you know, the likelihood of that happening in Portland is pretty high. One other tidbit, and you know, I've got 2 more case examples and I'll finish here, but Lucy said the one thing that in terms of population growth, I mean, if you're not prepared, and certainly in San Francisco with this blue line, they had the 1906 earthquake, as you guys all know about it. But you see, in terms of growth, West Coast growth in California, I mean, you can see where San Francisco pretty much flatlined. I mean, certainly there was some growth, but it was about that same time. Two things happened. I think you certainly had the basically the introduction of lots of water into the LA basin in 1913. But I think a lot of these folks that might have otherwise contributed to the gross national product or just the livability of San Francisco departed and moved to part of this population surge went from San Francisco to LA, and that it basically took off right about that same time. So you can see where, you know, that's what's happening in New Orleans and other places where they've had disasters. These towns don't tend to recover. I should have continued this San Francisco line out to 1980. Basically, San Francisco never really recovered until the Silicon Valley boom in the 70s and early 80s is when San Francisco started getting back. So I'll redo this slide and continue it on, but it really hit San Francisco hard for many years. In terms of getting prepared for an earthquake, I was part of this committee that worked on the Earthquake Ready Burnside Bridge, and the idea that we need one bridge across the Willamette somewhere. And this is the place that was picked to build a earthquake resilient bridge. You know, we basically this whole east side of the river, this is all part of the Missoula flood channel over here on the east side, and it goes all the way. The liquefiable soil goes all the way to Third Street over here, Third Avenue, I should say. And the idea that you have a movable bridge, you know, this whole structure is not ready for a 7, and the idea that you could be operating that bridge. There's no precautions in terms of moving the leaves on the bascule portion of the bridge. You know, you've got to design for that, and the new bridge is going to do that. You can see this is an idea. This is the one that we advanced in terms of next stage. But this is the west side, and this is the east side. And you see this huge structure over here on this east side. It's not on the river, okay? And the big cost items, there was a lot of talk about using the existing bridge and just beefing it up. It turns out, because about where this tall building is, from here all the way to the river, all this is going to slide into the river out here, and basically here in terms of you know, a possibility. So you know, that whole idea. So this whole span, this whole basically this arch span. This is a bascule section and a movable part of the bridge, and then so we've got an arch here and an arch here, and this one's longer because it goes all the way back into about Third Avenue before you hit competent ground. And the idea is, if you put a pier in here, anywhere you put this pier, you're going to have to basically withstand all this potential earth moving due to liquefaction. You can see up here in the sketch that basically this whole thing moves. And that's the same problem we have up north of here, up north of the St. John's Bridge, up here where this red, this is where we have all our fuel. You know, we got the Williams pipeline coming down from Anacortes, and it terminates here, and then some of it goes towards the airport and the other. But basically most of it, I think we have a line that goes down to Eugene now. But, you know, the whole idea, this whole landmass here was filled with this water and muck out of the Willamette River. So all this stuff is going to slide right at you. So we got the same problem as the Burnside Bridge down here. All these tanks will be flowing in here, and that's not going to be a pretty sight at all. But anyway, I'll end with that one, and I do want you to get a hold of your congressperson. They're right now in Salem. They're voting whether they want to continue the Burnside Bridge. And that hearing was today. But if you could write a note, it's House Bill 3323. You basically want to do that as soon as you can. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Charles. Thank you, guys.
You're muted, Charles.
There's a very comprehensive presentation, Bill. Are there any questions that anybody has at this point in time?
Go ahead, Scott.
Yep. I just have a couple comments. First of all, Bill, absolutely superb talk. I loved all of your examples. I mean, one after another, great graphics, and you hit on all of the very important things. And I love your ending up talking about the Burnside Bridge, which is down in the legislature right now. And I love the fact that you mentioned Christchurch, where I lived, and I actually was in the country when the very first earthquake hit down there. The reason the second one, even though it was less, had more damage was that it occurred at noon. And a huge tower downtown crushed a bus with a whole bunch of kids in it, whereas the first one occurred like 4 o'clock in the morning when I was there. And I woke up in the morning and they mentioned, oh, did you hear about what happened on the South Island? I was in Auckland at that time.
Okay.
You covered so many different things, and I think that was very good. And I love what's happening with Shake Alert, and the next version of Shake Alert that we will get, which will come out in 1.5 to 2 years. When on our phone we get it, it will tell us not only that there is an earthquake, but it'll say where it is, what's the magnitude, and how much time we have until it comes. And the southern margin of Cascadia, that is the Gorda Plate, which is twice as active as the whole margin from one end to the other, it will give us 4 minutes to get out of the buildings and get off the bridges. And I think that will be great when that comes out, but we have until that time. And you're looking at the unreinforced masonry buildings that we have in Portland. We have so many of those. And so thank you. Congratulations. Great job.
It was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott.
Really great. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions of Bill on this or Scott?
Well, Susan Hansen put one on the chat, and I can speak to that. She's asking if there is any kind of relationship between the Cascade subduction zone and the San Andreas. Now, Susan, I don't know if you've heard Chris Goldfinger talk, but he loves to talk about that interaction, and he's of a mind, and he's got evidence to support it, that what he thinks could happen is that you'll have movement on the Cascadia subduction zone quake. You'll get some movement on this plate, the Juan de Fuca plate, and that will precipitate movement on the San Andreas. That's his thinking, and he cites a couple of turbidity currents that were created down there just north of Mendocino for his timing for that. I don't know if you can add to that, Scott, but that's the best I can do.
You nailed it.
Yeah, I'll say, well done.
Before you, I've got one question for Scott, and this is, I don't want to put you on the spotlight here, Scott, but one other thing that Chris Goldfinger worries about is this drop, cover, and hold, and he and I have talked a lot about that. In terms of if you get some sort of warning that, especially if you're in an unreinforced masonry building, that an earthquake's coming, I think you want to move. I think you want to.
And so what he's referring to right now is the Shake Alert that we have. It will just say earthquake happened and duck, cover, and hold. Bingo. within 2 years, when we have this refined shake alert, and it will come on and say earthquake, and they'll tell you where it is, what's the magnitude, and how much time you got. And in those cases, like the southern margin, you've got 3 to 4 minutes to get out of the building. Get out of the building. But right now, it is just a generic duck cover and hold. And and so with time, I think it'll be much more refined. Now, when the whole Cascadia goes, it'll come on and say duck cover and hold, and you'll have a much shorter period of time. And so trying to leave the building may not be good. And once they have the new shake alert or the updated one, it's going to have education. Everybody's going to be educated in how to use it and what does it mean. So I agree with him.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Brian Atwater said that the land in the area that he investigated drops approximately 6 feet. Is that going to be a universal or uniform drop in the entire Oregon coast? The entire length going to drop 6 feet? Or is it just under areas that are more marshy?
No, I think you know, it's what, I don't know if you can see my fingers, but the whole idea is if this is a continent over here and basically the ocean, so basically it'll when you get enough mass, once let's go back to the last earthquake, 1700. So everything is kind of flat. There's no tension or compression. And then what happens, Roger, over time, this mass will build up and it just creeps up real slowly. And then when you get this, if it's the entire length of the plate, it'll flick all at once. Okay, and the whole area will drop 6 feet. Is my interpretation, Scott. Now, when they put 101 in, Roger, they did a survey, and a few years ago they went to check the you know, the elevations that they shot back in 1938 or 39, whenever they built Highway 101, and basically over the whole length of 101, it's come up about 37 inches in that time. So, you know, that's an anecdotal piece of information, but what that's saying is the whole highway from Reedsport up to Cannon Beach it's all coming up uniformly.
Yeah, I'm familiar more with the Lincoln Beach area too, an area around what's the
Salishan.
well, Salishan, and then there's the one resort that's right at the top of the hill as you going south, in at the Spanish Head. That entire wall of material there is sloughing off now. They have some of the rentals there have lost 15 to 20 feet in 10 years. So if that quake happens, I assume those houses are gone. They're going to go right into the beach area or down into the ocean.
Yeah, I think you're getting a combination. You know, again, when you're bringing something up, you know, in a sense, you know, you're steepening everything. So when you get things that are over steepened, they'll tend to erode more readily. I mean, you got a combination of seafloor rising, you got the king tides, and then you get a little more over steepening. It's a recipe for landslides. And Scott's an expert on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been advising on basically an embankment which is down by San Clemente on the Amtrak main line between Fullerton, California, and San Diego, and they've quit running passenger trains over that. They run freight trains, but not passenger, because that whole fill area is creeping towards the ocean. I mean, it's pretty hard to operate a mainline railroad on a boundary on the Pacific Ocean. So they're actually talking about rerouting that railroad. So we'll see how that turns out down there.
I'm I'm a native of San Francisco, and our house was built in 1906, and all the there were three fireplaces in it, and none of them were ever able to be used. And what we I was always told as a kid was if there's an earthquake, run and stand in the doorway. And I do remember uh, our house had a 50-foot hallway with a rug in it, and the Tehachapi earthquake hit 1952 in the early morning, and I ran out in the sun in the twilight of the morning, and I was watching the the rug in the hallway all the way from where I was in the back all the way to the front of the house. It would just look like a wave.
Yeah.
So that would be an S wave, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you're getting the full power of the earthquake there.
that's right. And that was a very disastrous earthquake. I remember very well. It
Yeah.
actually knocked the wooden slats out of my bed, and the whole mattress fell on the floor down the middle.
Okay.
No more wooden slats in bed. Anyhow, um, that but duck and cover is the word now, as opposed to go stand in a doorway.
Yeah, yeah, you want to, especially if you're in the lower floors of a unreinforced masonry building. You just saw what happened over in Turkey. I mean,
Right.
it's not a good place to be. And you know, this friend of mine that lives in an unreinforced building downtown Portland, she lives on the seventh floor of an eight-story unreinforced. I said, well, you won't have enough time to get out going down, but you do want to climb up, and that's what people did in Haiti. They went to the top floor of these buildings, and they basically wrote them down when the whole thing collapsed.
Oh boy.
Uh, you know, but if you do get 4 or 5 minutes warning, I agree with Scott. You want to get away from those unreinforced buildings.
Yep.
They're not a good place to be. And I'm
Right.
not, again, I think we need to get a program where we're paying folks to rebuild these.
Hmm. I did not realize that Loess basically is sand, then, isn't it? It's
No, it's silt.
silt. Okay, got it.
Yep.
Thank you. But
Yeah,
it also
lots of
is
silt
what
here.
makes the valley very fertile. Yeah.
Well, and it's a pretty good medium in which to build a wood structure house. I mean, that's a very survivable scenario. I didn't go into tying homes to the foundation, but if you can do that, your chances of surviving this earthquake is pretty high. Um, the flip side of that is if you choose not to tie your home down to a foundation, and we do have an earthquake, and after the shaking ends, and if your home is maybe as many as or as little as 5 to 6 inches off the foundation, the city will, I know the city of Portland's got a real bad reputation for acting very slowly these
Mhm.
days. But on condemning the homes, they're going to act very fast. And the reason they're going to act very fast and condemn your home if it's 6 inches off the foundation is because of the aftershocks. They're not going to want anybody to be in harm's way during an aftershock. So they'll come down and they'll red flag your home like within a couple of days. That's not a nice scenario, but they're going to have to protect themselves. Even though it's incumbent upon everybody to do what they can to take care of yourself in terms of a wood structure home on silt is very, very survivable, and it's very easy to retrofit your home to where it's
Mhm.
not going to be an earthquake hazard.
Mhm. What about trees? Does it uproot trees easily?
No, no, they're tied. They are tied to the earth. I mean, and that's the principle you want to look at, Charles. I mean, if you can tie your superstructure of your house down to your foundation, that's like a tree putting its roots down into the ground.
Right.
It's a very and that's why pipelines do a good job of surviving too. They rock and roll with the earth.
Hmm.
Um, but you do have to tie them down now. Dan, branches that are dead on a tree are going to come down. I mean, because, you know, it's no different than a big windstorm. So there's some hazard there. And then when I give a talk in terms of earthquake, you know, what I want folks to do is right after this talk is go outside your house and look around and see what you would do in terms of an earthquake. You want to do that before you actually have the earthquake. You want to go out and see where the electrical lines come into your house, because those will snap based on compression and tension that happens when the earth is moving. You're not going to be able to control that. So you want to be able to stand someplace where there's no electric lines around you, and you have to assume they're live. That's what they teach you in the net training. So, you know, there's a lot of things you can do beforehand. You don't want to be standing under a chimney. You know, again, trees aren't going to tip over or anything, but you do want to, if you have some big branches up there that you haven't pruned the dead stuff out, I mean, you want to be careful there too, because, you know, the tree will shed its dead branches at that time.
Right. Does anyone else have any questions? Well, hearing none, I think it's time to close the meeting. Is anybody interested in giving us a hand with constant contact or Zoom management? That's something that we have a need for and so forth. But you know, let us know. Just address that to our email address, which I mentioned earlier, which is lowercolumbia@iafi.org. Love to hear anything you do or anything you can do to help and work with us. Thank you so much. And we sure
Thank you, Charles.
We sure look forward to, Bill, I can't thank you so much, and we look forward to Scott's talk in April on the 20th at 7 o'clock, and it will be at the over at the Tualatin Heritage Center, which is right across the street from the police department in the city of Tualatin.
Well, thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot. With that, the meeting is closed, and thank you so much for coming this evening.